The title of this message, Come, Holy Spirit. In telling the story of God's love as revealed through Jesus, the story begins with his ministry, and then his death and his resurrection. And then, as expressed in Peter's sermon in Acts chapter 2:33, Jesus is exalted to the right hand of God, has received from God the promised Holy Spirit, and pours the Spirit out upon his disciples. Jesus came from God, returned to God, and came back through the Holy Spirit to bring God's love to all his disciples. How shall we describe the Holy Spirit? At Jesus' baptism, the Spirit is like a gentle dove. At Pentecost, the Spirit is like a tornadic wind and blazing fire. In Revelation chapter 4, the Holy Spirit appears as blazing fire before the throne of God. In Revelation 5, the Holy Spirit appears as the eyes of Jesus sent out into all the earth. In Revelation 22, the Spirit appears as a river of water flowing from God and from the Lamb, which is Jesus. The Holy Spirit, sent from the heart of God, sent from the heart of Jesus, to refresh and renew all creation, and most of all, God's people. The Spirit is all these: dove, wind, fire, water of life. The Spirit flows as God and Jesus pour out love's living water on those who are searching for life's meaning. The Spirit shows us that the simple meaning of life is love. The Holy Spirit is the in-between God, bringing us God's gift of love to share with a needy world. Love poured out like rain on thirsty ground. In Ephesians 3:14-19, the Holy Spirit gives inner strength and ability to receive the gift of God's love and to pass it on to others. What can we take from these images of the Holy Spirit as the bearer of God's love? The bearer of God's love in a world torn apart by fear, by hatred, and by violence? First thing, we must stay connected. We must stay connected to the gospel message, to the old story of God's love. And in order to know the story and tell the story, or to know the story, we must know the story before we can tell the story. And it's a story that never grows old. The gospel story is rooted in Jesus' ministry. A ministry where he goes about doing good and overcoming the works of the devil. But then, as his ministry continues, the tide begins to turn. And all the deadly powers of evil are conspiring against Jesus. The devil has his legions of demons. The devil has the religious authorities, the governing authorities. and soldiers to carry out his evil designs. And so on that dark Friday, outside the city walls, the devil, being a gambler, puts all his aces on the table. He has all his forces gathered together against Jesus. They're all there. Again, the religious authorities, the government authorities, they're all there. The soldiers. And so as Jesus breathes his last and gives up his spirit, it appears that it's all over. It appears that Jesus is lost, dead, and gone. It appears the devil succeeded. It looks like God has lost the battle. It does indeed seem like it's all over. But it's only Friday. Sunday came. And God has another hand to play. Resurrection. Death could never keep its prey when Jesus arose on Easter Day. And all creation sings and shares the joy the good news brings. God has won the victory. God's victory happens daily in the lives of all who continue to love and refuse to give in to fear and hate. The devil loses. God wins when love wins. And this is our story to tell. God wins every day in the lives of ordinary folks who still hear the gentle whisper of the heavenly dove and keep on keeping on to do the right thing and to share the love the Holy Spirit brings. God wins every day in all who rise above their circumstances, guided by a vision of how things ought to be, who do not follow the crowds, but who lead others in the way of love. God wins wherever love wins, because God is love. God wins every day where the Holy Spirit ignites a fire in faithful hearts, a fire of courage and determination to share the old story of Jesus and his love. God's love is expressed in the Bible with a familiar image of the human body with Jesus as the head. The church is not a building. It is people brought together by God's love. But love comes with a warning label. Love has no shelf life. It has to be practiced all the time. In Revelation 2:4, there is a warning to the church at Ephesus. I have this against you, that you have left your first love. It happens. Love is like a fire which must be tended to regularly. When love's fire is no longer a priority, we grow apart and love begins to die. It happens slowly. We don't recognize what is happening at first. But this loss of love becomes fatal. In relationships, we can't put love on a shelf and return later. Church is a relationship. It's a body of people with Christ as the head. We are a people, a body gathered together by Christ's love for us and by our love for one another. We gather to tell the story. Worship is part of telling the story of God's love. Because of COVID-19, we were forced to neglect our relationships with one another in our church community. Now we face choices. Will we find a way to keep on gathering together so that the Holy Spirit may continue to pour out his love upon us, that we may continue to be a church community where we tell the old story of Jesus and his love. It's our choice. God bless.